Puerto Rico, a Caribbean paradise, a global economic player, and a U.S. jurisdiction with a business-friendly landscape and the resiliency to adapt, improve, and grow. Home to 12 of the top 20 pharmaceutical companies in the world, Puerto Rico specializes in logistics, medical devices, and R&D, providing the world with critical drugs and supplies. We export more bioscience products than the next 2 U.S. states combined and manufacture products made nowhere else. Our biosciences industry is driven by a talented bilingual workforce educated at top national universities. The island ranks 6th globally in available scientists and engineers, supplying the industry with over 94,000 direct jobs. A global logistics leader, Puerto Rico exports bioscience products to over 100 countries and now has the opportunity to expand its global presence as an international air transfer hub. Our 60-year bioscience legacy makes Puerto Rico the perfect place to support national security and global business. We welcome companies with move-in-ready facilities and the industry support necessary to establish operations quickly. Tap into our people power, our high-value networks, and low-cost supply chains. Puerto Rico is perfectly positioned to reshore pharmaceutical development and manufacturing. Help the U.S. secure critical supply lines with the most competitive assets in the country available to foreign bioscience manufacturers. Puerto Rico is the best destination for bioscience reshoring. The time to act is now. The place is Puerto Rico.
Good afternoon. My name is Roderick Miller. I'm CEO of Invest Puerto Rico and very glad to be having this industry capabilities tour roundtable around reshoring pharmaceuticals manufacturing to Puerto Rico. It's really a crucial step in securing the U.S. supply chain and ensuring manufacturing continuity. Let me start by just sharing a little bit about Invest Puerto Rico. Invest Puerto Rico is the island's public-private partnership focused on attracting new investment to the island. Invest Puerto Rico was established in 2017 via law for the purpose specifically of promoting Puerto Rico to the rest of the world as a targeted location for foreign direct investment. The reason why Invest Puerto Rico was started was to ensure continuity, and so that it didn't matter what political administration at the gubernatorial level or at the federal levels in place, that there would be a clear strategy for Puerto Rico. It was something that's private sector led because we know that the private sector leads and is going to make this investments over the long term, but that the public sector is a critical partner. So Invest Puerto Rico was established with those things in mind. And we try to carry out our mission of attracting new investment through 3 channels. Channel number 1 is through business development. From a business development perspective, we're keenly focused on establishing relationships with key decision makers in companies, in law firms and private equity firms, so that they know the value that Puerto Rico brings, and so that they can advise their clients and make quality decisions that are going to allow them to make more money in Puerto Rico than they'll make somewhere else. And we believe that Puerto Rico actually has that competitive advantage. The second way that we try to bring about change is through changing the narrative about Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, much of the narrative of Puerto Rico has been rooted in crisis, whether it's the hurricanes, the earthquakes, the fiscal crisis, or other realities. But that's not all that Puerto Rico is. Puerto Rico is so much more. It's a bilingual market with a highly educated population at the center of the Caribbean with access to the Americas, a manufacturing powerhouse with over 60 years of experience. And those are the things that we're trying to elevate from a marketing perspective. And then the third channel that we use to promote Puerto Rico is really through strategy. And from a strategic perspective, it's about really lowering barriers to enter the market. So how do we work with partners to make sure that processes run more smoothly, as well as how do we provide quality information? So whether it's market insights, site information, information about the pharmaceutical sector, those sorts of things, Invest Puerto Rico is here to work with you. And so then the question becomes, why reshoring? Why Puerto Rico? And why now? Well, it's very simple. If we rewind to December of 2019, in December of 2019, Invest Puerto Rico rolled out its strategy for moving forward, its promotional plan. And the promotional plan clearly laid out this is how we're going to attract new investments to Puerto Rico. And at the center of that promotional plan was this idea of knowledge services, which was IT and software, professional services, financial services, business services. And the thinking was these are not infrastructure intensive sectors. So you're really talking about a person and a computer. So the decisions could be made relatively quickly and the companies could get started. Now, while we recognize the strength in the pharmaceutical sector, at that time, our thinking was that our partners at the Department of Commerce and Economic Development would focus on retaining those companies because we didn't see the trend of those companies in India and China coming back to the United States, coming back to the Americas. Then COVID-19 happened, and COVID-19 really has changed our world. One of the, social distancing is the norm. You see us around here with masks. That's become the norm. And companies are really recognizing, health and health security is kind of the one of the most important global issues, and so investments are going in that direction. Companies are reconsidering their real estate as their employees work from home. And then there's the emergence of policies that are really saying, how do we actually get critical infrastructure back, critical manufacturing infrastructure back to the United States? The pandemic has exposed the gaps in the global pharma supply chain. And for American residents at a critical time, it was very difficult to get the things that we needed. Now, the good news to that is that there is a solution, and we believe that Puerto Rico is a critical part of that solution. I want to underscore for those who may not know that Puerto Rico is a part of the United States and has been a part of the United States, actually has one of the highest levels of military service of any group in the United States. So we're proud Americans. And at a time like this, we knew that it was essential for Puerto Rico to step up and actually be a solution. We're the largest exporter of biopharmaceuticals in the United States. We've got over a 50-year history in this sector. We've got over 30 years in sterile manufacturing, over $50 billion in total exports. And then when you look at that within the context of the challenge that we're facing, it's even more significant because what we know right now is we know that 40 to 45% of heparin, which is one of the important drugs, is manufactured in China. 70% of acetaminophen is manufactured in China. 80% of APIs are manufactured in China. And 90% of US antibiotics, vitamin C, ibuprofen, and hydrocortisone are manufactured in China. But the good news is they don't have to be. They can be manufactured right here in Puerto Rico. We've got tremendous capacity, and this is really an opportunity for Puerto Rico to be the solution that it can be. With over 90,000 people employed in the bio sector, we've got strong workforce development, and then with robust assets, which we've been viewing over the last few days, takes much less time for a company to actually get into facilities and get up and going in Puerto Rico than it would other places. So we believe that Puerto Rico is the solution to shifts in the pharma supply chain. And we've got the proven track record, we've got the willingness, and unfortunately, we've got leadership in the White House and a partner in Rear Admiral Brown that really believes in Puerto Rico and is trying to bring additional resources. So we know that with our experience and with our history and with the support of the federal government and strong local partners, we can get a lot done. Now, as we reshifted our efforts after our promo plan launch a promotional plan launch in December, and a few months later said we really got to hunker down on pharmaceuticals. What did that really mean? Well, we've increased our business development leads over 32% in just the last quarter. We've got over 500 bioscience companies in our pipeline that we've connected with in the last 6 to 9 months. In addition to that, we attended Bio International and Bio Asia virtually, and we had over 30 meetings with bioscience companies there. We've hosted 2 webinars on reshoring opportunities with over 300 attendees in those. And of course, we've done a targeted marketing campaign focused on reshoring bioscience in major media. That targeted campaign, we hit over 10 markets in the United States that we knew that had a strong concentration to say, how do we partner? How do we actually get you to get more bang for your buck so that we can bring more of these facilities that are in Asia and other parts of the world back home? And now this industry capabilities tour is really the pinnacle of our efforts, because not only do we have leadership from the federal government, from numerous agencies in the federal government, we've also got private companies from around the country and actually around the world that have come to participate in this. And we've got strong private sector and public sector partners locally who are all rowing in the same direction. So we're excited about what lies ahead. And we know that we can get a lot done. And now is the time. So we're ready to support. We can provide supports with site selection. We have the supply and distribution chains. Remember, we have over 60 years of experience in the sector. We have the expertise and workforce. We have a higher concentration of pharmaceutical professionals than any other place in the United States. And we have a history of bioscience excellence. So, and I think for closing thoughts, I'll say this, the pandemic has really spotlighted that there is no market that is safe from force majeure or from risk. And as these risks continue to emerge, you want to have a partner who's ready to go. And Puerto Rico's ready to go. Whether it was the earthquakes where, I'm relatively new to Puerto Rico. I've been here a year and a half. And when the earthquakes hit, I was like, wow, I'm from the South. So I knew about hurricanes, but earthquake, when I was shaking on the 10th floor, and everybody was shook up. 2 days later, I walked outside and everybody was like, yeah, we had an earthquake 2 days ago. No, we're not used to them either, but we've got work to do. So how do we roll up our sleeves? And I think now is really the time for us to roll up our sleeves on manufacturing. So we're excited about it. And we're very glad that we have great leadership from Rear Admiral Brown, who is the special representative to Puerto Rico for disaster recovery in the White House. Admiral Brown, thank you for coming. And with that, I'd love to pass it to you for some comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Rod. And thank you for laying out the case for Puerto Rico as America's solution to medical supply chain security. It is, as you've pointed out, as the others around the table, particularly Secretary LeBoy from Department of Commerce and Economic Development, know Puerto Rico has been a long-standing player in this field with a great range of expertise across not only the direct manufacturing sector, but also the other elements of the medical supply chain that go along with it. And so I'll take a minute just to talk about the things that the Trump administration is doing to do more than just talk about this issue, but to actually bring federal programs and federal emphasis to this work. So in addition to the other departments and agencies that are working on direct infrastructure recovery, FEMA, HUD, and others, Army Corps of Engineers, who are doing really important work with the electrical grid, water supply, roads and transportation, housing, schools, all the other things that have to happen for Puerto Rico to fully recover. We're also looking at the economic recovery of Puerto Rico. And the manufacturing sector is the biggest part of the economy of Puerto Rico, and pharmaceutical and medical devices are a large part of that sector. The president has used the Defense Production Act to push private industry into the direction of nationally critical needs. He has signed a number of executive orders regarding reshoring, particularly of the medical supply chain. And very importantly, he's authorized the Development Finance Corporation, an organization that previously did overseas investment on behalf of the United States, to now look at and lend to domestic companies that are doing work that will benefit the nation's medical supply chain. And what I'll do is I will summarize all that in a kind of bumper sticker slogan that my colleague, Dr. Navarro in the White House, and I have been working on. And he just boldly tweeted out right before we started here that China is fired and Puerto Rico is hired. When it comes to America's medical supply chain.
That's fantastic. I love it.
China is fired and Puerto Rico is hired. And so we're accompanied here not only by DDEC with Secretary LeBoy. We also have the EPA represented and Associate Administrator Ben Veneto. We have the Department of Energy represented by my colleague Juan Carlos Rivera, Puerto Rico Manufacturers Association. We have Dr. Navarro's office, the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, Pete Lopez also from EPA, Gail Nolan from Invest Puerto Rico. We're here to answer your questions and concerns about how the various federal programs and Government of Puerto Rico programs might be able to help match up a company with a project that can meet national needs with perhaps an existing facility that may be close to move-in ready, how we can do that. And as EPA pointed out to us in a session a little bit earlier, in addition to being a regulator, they're also a facilitator. And part of my job as President Trump's special representative for Puerto Rico disaster recovery is, if we find that there is a federal obstacle to your success, we'll work to eliminate that obstacle or find a way to overcome it so that we can keep these things moving forward with the ultimate goal of a secure national medical supply chain and a resilient and self-sustaining economy in Puerto Rico.
Thank you.
So at this point, can we open it up to our participants and see if we have any questions yet? If we don't, Gail, then what I do is I'd suggest that we go to EPA Deputy Associate Administrator for some comments about EPA's role, and particularly in addition to their regulatory role, the financing role that you described before, and the brownfields programs.
Sure. Thanks, Admiral. I really appreciate it. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and take the tours today. It's evident from the last couple of days I've spent here that the energy and the desire to be open for business is just manifest in Puerto Rico, and we're here to help however we can. As Rear Admiral Brown mentioned, EPA does three things. We regulate, we lend money, and we grant money. All three of those things, I think, are important with respect to what you're trying to do here in Puerto Rico. As a regulator, we can provide technical assistance and guidance and work with people who want to develop land, particularly land that may have been slightly contaminated or still is slightly contaminated. We can provide, a bona fide prospective purchaser protection, which basically means if you do the work to study the land, if cleanup has been done, and if you use the land the way you tell us you're going to use it, we can give you liability protection in the future, which is really important. Look, one of your most valuable commodities is land. You're an island, and that's really important. Sort of land recycling is very important, and what we can do is provide incentives and protection for those who choose to do that on previously developed land. We're also a lender. We lend money and we grant money. One of the programs that I want to highlight is our Brownfield program. It's a grant program where we lend money to nonprofits, we grant money to nonprofits, and we grant money to government agencies to go in and clean up land so that it can be used for future productive purposes instead of opening up greenfields. This is land recycling, and we think it's really important. The economic benefit of our Brownfield program is unquestioned. For every dollar that's spent on it nationwide, you get about a $17 return. The multiplier effect is there. I suspect it would be greater if you were to look at it just from a perspective of using it in Puerto Rico. There is a jobs element to this. We're providing money to clean up and clean up land. So it's going to be work that can be it's construction work. It's other good high-paying jobs. So we're here to help. We are a regulator. We have a job of protecting human health and the environment, and we will do that job. But that job doesn't always mean we have to do it with permits or we have to do it through a regulatory hammer. It means that we can do it through providing technical assistance and providing grants. So we're here to help. Tell us how we can help, and we'll do the best that we can. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
We do have questions
Okay,
now.
excellent.
The first is, and the person asking this question didn't identify themselves, but it does say, how will the federal government help with energy costs on the island? And then there's a second part, how will we find funding for brownfields? And the third part is, how can we find affordable insurance? So maybe the first question,
Maybe go to
the
Juan.
energy question.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Sure. How will the federal government help with energy costs on the island?
So the Department of Energy itself is working on a technical coordination team that works with the local government, right, and is working to kind of streamline permitting and find ways to make energy more reliable, cost competitive.
Right.
Thank you. It really comes down to, I think, some help with the federal government, but a lot of it comes down to fixing PREPA in a way. And I think that the governor's done a great job with the LUMA agreement. I think there's other agreements that are in sight. There's a legacy project. There's one that's going to allow the private sector, hopefully, to run the legacy infrastructure on the island, and then kind of transition out of that. And there might be another private-public partnership agreement for Palo Seco in the future, which would produce somewhere between 300 megawatts and 1,200 megawatts, which would hopefully bring costs down, increase reliability. In the LUMA contract, we're going to see the transmission and distribution of energy. That's going to hopefully make the private sector a little more comfortable with the grid, so that they don't have to rely that much on their own energy systems when we when we visit these facilities, especially the API facilities. They're very energy intensive, right? They require a lot of energy, and having a reliable grid and through these private-public partnership agreements is going to make businesses more comfortable to come back to Puerto Rico. And we're also looking at alternative energy sources. All of the above energy strategy is supportive of that. We're going to look at solar, wind, natural gas, and even nuclear, small modular reactors, to see how we can power these energy intensive industries and make sure that Puerto Rico is ready to grow and bring jobs back and increase manufacturing. And I think they are.
Thank you so much. That was actually, and he just wrote in and said that was Carlos Guardiola, who's an industrial developer. So the second part of that question is, how can we find funding for brownfields?
What we will do is we will get you contact information on how to apply for those grants, and we'll provide it to you all, and then you can provide it to your members.
Fantastic. And then the third part is, how can we find affordable insurance? And maybe that's a question for you, Carlos.
Affordable insurance, I guess, when there's quite a few companies here that can actually provide that. So it's just a matter of getting in contact with us, and we'll provide a list of and refer that to them.
Great, thank you.
I don't know if they're relating the question to insurance regarding the liability of the fields that you were talking before, because it seems like it's more related to that than anything else.
Yeah, there is some liability protection available through the bona fide prospective purchaser program. We also can provide information for you on that and how you have to take certain steps in order to be eligible. And what it does is provides protection in the event that you use the land in the way that was outlined. So it's liability protection.
Right.
It's I think fairly important. So what we'll do is we can provide background information for you on that as well.
Great, thank you very much. And this next is actually a comment, not a question, from Mayra Guzman-Caslo from GK, and she just said she wants to thank everybody for visiting their facility, and what a wonderful visit, and how appreciative she is of the trip and the interest that the federal government is showing in their facility.
If I could, I'd like to amplify that comment a little bit, because we did have an excellent visit with Mayra and her team out there. Really an extraordinary group. One of the only, as far as we know, one of the only Hispanic woman-owned pharmaceutical businesses in the world. And this actually fits with another element of the Trump administration strategy, which is the Hispanic Prosperity Initiative. The president has taken extraordinary steps to improve educational economic opportunities for all Americans, including Hispanics, and including very specifically Puerto Rico. And so the things that Mayra and her team are doing out there are very consistent with the overall goals that this administration has. Want to see an economy that creates opportunity for all, and her team and the work they're doing is a great example of that.
Great, okay, so the next question is regarding the DFC and the DPA loan. Oh, sorry, that question I'm having a technical challenge. Natalia.
While we're getting that,
thank
Helen,
you.
what if we ask Manuel to say a couple words about the things that the government of Puerto Rico is doing with regard to permitting and ease of doing business?
Thank you, Real Admiral. Certainly, that's one of our primary focus, not only as part of our public policy, but also it's a very important component of the certified fiscal plan for the government of Puerto Rico. And certainly, it's divided in certain aspects. One of them being the streamlining of permits. For many years, there's been major attempts by different administrations to pursue the goal to provide certainty in terms of permitting in Puerto Rico. And the fact is that for many, many years, it's been kind of a complicated process. For the last 3 years, we've actually put together a very ambitious plan to actually try to streamline, consolidate a number of certifications and permits, and trying to make it even more easier. But at the same time of making sure that there's compliance when it comes down to environment in terms of safety and so forth. So it is a major component. We are right now making huge investments on the important investments on the technology platform. All of our permitting is now filed online. That's one aspect. Number two, for example, we consolidated. Prior to 2019, there were like 5 or 5 different construction permits is being consolidated into one permit. We used to provide close to 25 different permits and certifications for the use permit. Now it is being consolidated into the unique permit. So there's been a lot of effort. Right now, we're focusing on strengthening a new joint regulation. We actually receive a lot of feedback from the private sector, including the Puerto Rico Manufacturers Association, the Puerto Rico Chambers of Commerce, and many other trade organizations to really see how can we go to the next level. This is a decades-long problem. We have actually achieved important milestones, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. And getting that feedback from the private sector has been important. And we are now at the stage of submitting a new joint regulation that actually gathers all the key information that we got and recommendations from the private sector. And we hope to actually roll out the process for public comments of this new joint regulation over the next couple of weeks. So it is a very important aspect for us in terms of the ease of doing business. And we can actually, there's many other aspects as well, but I wanted to highlight the permitting side. I think that the government, at the end of the day, it needs to be a facilitator. We need to get out of the way, let the private sector do what it does best, which is to invest, create jobs, and promote wealth. And that's our, philosophy. And we just want to support, private investment and leverage, with the different services that we offer on the government side.
Great, thank you. Technical difficulties solved. The question is regarding the DFC and DPA loan program. We're interested, but the guide indicates that target investments in the $10 million to $500 million range is required. This is too large for many of the businesses in Puerto Rico, specifically small businesses. Can there be some consideration for Puerto Rico businesses that are interested in the program?
Chris?
Yeah, I think I would, of course, defer to the DFC on the specific details of this. And unfortunately, they aren't able to join us today. But I know, I think, from my understanding and in speaking with them, they're starting with the sort of larger, more impactful bids first, just to help address the immediate crisis at hand with the coronavirus situation. But as they process some of those larger, shorter term proposals, that they're going to begin to consider some of those smaller proposals as well once they have the chance to increase their staffing capabilities.
Thank you.
If I may, I'm Regional Administrator for US EPA Region 2, just working in partnership with other agencies, or maybe other agencies that can assist. So, and they may not be the form of a loan, they may be form of loan guarantees for smaller amounts. So USDA Rural Development and possibly SBA also may have loan guarantee programs where you leverage money from the private sector through the banks, but have full faith and credit support of a loan guarantee through the federal government. So there may be some opportunities to explore for lower volume lending.
Great. And actually, if I could add also, I understand that University of Mayagüez is serving as the EDA University Center on the island. And they are just now looking for disaster coordinators who can help entities write grants for these kinds of programs. So that could be a resource for the different companies. Were there any other thoughts or inputs for that question?
Well, I think
go ahead,
one other item regarding the DFC loans, and while we focused in some cases somewhat narrowly on pharmaceutical and medical device manufacturing, really the goal is to improve the overall national medical supply chain. So upstream or downstream of the actual manufacturing process, this could be in transportation and logistics, it could be in documentation and information management, it could be in actually the infrastructure to support a facility or a consortium of facilities. All of those types of projects could be amenable to this type of financing if they can be shown to have this positive impact on the medical supply chain.
Now, let me add, perhaps this might be a question added to the same topic. One of the things that's happening that guides that question is that although we are such a large manufacturing base, many of that actually are large companies that can actually make use of a law firm, an accounting firm that can actually tap into opportunities. And I think what we need to understand as a local manufacturer, that we don't have the size and the resources like these companies do, is where we start. I mean, how we can actually look at opportunities and where we look for those opportunities. If any of you can give us some guidelines on where to start with those opportunities, aside from financing, which is one of the questions, regarding where we start. I mean,
so you're saying navigating how to align the best grant program for the best application within the business.
Mm-hmm. So that will be.
Well, I was going to mention that two things. Number one, in terms of the DFC, one of the things that I really like about this particular tour is that it was targeted to actually do a matchmaking between, what the DFC offers and what are the, short-term, even low-hanging fruit opportunities that we have right now in Puerto Rico that can do a good match in terms of the, of the finance support and the state of some of the companies that we have in Puerto Rico, actually being some of them, external companies that are doing business in Puerto Rico, or even local companies like GK Pharma. So that's one thing. And then in terms of the small business, I can understand, the question. If we look specifically at manufacturing, in Puerto Rico, we have about 1,700 companies that are on the NICS code under manufacturing, 1,700 roughly. And of those, I will say that at least 85% are just small and medium enterprises. Okay, so certainly there is a need for some of those entities, to access to capital. In Puerto Rico, for the last couple of years, there's been kind of a concentration of the market in terms of, traditional banks. Now there are more cooperatives, that are getting into the market. And one of the things, one of the reasons why, after Hurricanes Maria and Irma hit Puerto Rico, and we were starting to draft the action plan for CDBG-DR, was precisely to include a small business financing program. And that was actually launched, I think it was back in March, roughly, this year, 2020. And it provides up to $50,000 in cash grant. And there's going to be like a second phase of the program that will include a line of credit to support specifically, small, medium enterprises that were affected by Maria, that by definition, basically was the whole island. So that is an example of trying to use incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, resources like CDBG-DR, to actually tackle unmet needs. In this particular case, the necessity for financing, which we realized that it was going to be a very important thing to tackle if we want to make sure that not only the reconstruction, supports, some of the broader things that we're looking for, but also targeting small and medium enterprises in order to address their needs.
Thank you. The next question is from Richard Laughlin from Avara Pharmaceuticals. And his question is, they're a pharmaceutical contractor a contract manufacturer, and they operate a facility formerly owned by Merck. And in fact, we passed that facility yesterday. We are currently have excess oral solid dose capacity in available buildings and land for additional uses. We would like to extend an invitation to visit us in Arecibo. How can we become more engaged? So where would be, we had limited time to look at limited sites. How would we engage them in the future?
Well, I think that forums like this one and the engagement of Invest Puerto Rico and the recent farmer reshoring paper that you put out, I think that's a good first step. Forums like this that invite players in the industry to look at kind of across the room at one another and see where those possible matches are. If they put in a DFC loan application with an idea toward expanding their own activities, that may, as we run those by Health and Human Services and Department of Defense, they may be aware of another opportunity that may match up even better than an in-house opportunity. And and as DFC rep told me the other day, they don't worry about how many deals they make. They're worried about this overall goal of the national medical supply chain. So if they start working on a project and as a result, a company finds private financing or a different dance partner, but still gets the deal done, that's absolutely fine. That part of their work, they understand, is going to be in this matchmaking kind of arrangement and not always in closing the loan deal.
Thank you. The next question is Darren Long from Pura Vital. And he says, thank you for such an impactful and immersive experience. Given the broad approach to alternative energy, have geothermal energy systems been explored, and would we be able to explore opportunities in geothermal energy in our medical device and nitrile glove facility development?
Yeah, I can answer that question initially, and also Juan can elaborate. As far as the information that I have, geothermal is an opportunity in Puerto Rico, but it's very targeted. The location, right? There are just specific areas like in the south that have potential for geothermal, and I believe that geothermal and even hydropower are probably underperforming in Puerto Rico. So I think there's room, right, for that kind of opportunity. Although I believe that in addition to that, you mentioned nuclear, for example. I believe that there's going to be kind of a diversified portfolio of opportunities into the future that includes also ocean technology, ocean energy, also natural gas, propane gas and things like that. Go ahead.
We were discussing earlier
Exactly
about ocean thermal technology, and the Trump administration has an all of the above energy strategy. So it depends on what you're doing. If you're in a very technical and precise manufacturing zone, you might want something like LNG that is consistent, right? If you're in manufacturing as well, so it depends on what industry you're targeting and what's best for that industry. So if it's geothermal, then and there's an opportunity for that, then I think it's acceptable. It makes sense.
The important thing is, from the public policy standpoint, is that we are moving away from a utility center system to customer center system. Mm-hmm. That is the key. And I think that the framework and the different strategies that are being pursued is to transition towards that kind of of vision, where at the end of the day it's about making sure that we can provide and suffice the needs of the customers, in talking about quality, talking about resiliency, mm-hmm. talking about competitive cost, and everything that makes the mix of energy the preferred partner to drive economic development in Puerto Rico.
Absolutely. And so one thing also about the DFC loans is that we can be broader than investing directly in a pharma industry. One of the examples that I talked to DFC about was being able to get a loan for maybe a cluster of pharmaceutical companies to build an energy facility so that it strengthens their pharmaceutical production, and that could improve the critical supply chain. So that could be an example of that. So there's many options that we can tap into.
We're also pursuing very intensively the microgrids model as well. So that's something that also fits very well with all these new technologies and the things that we're trying to do here in Puerto Rico.
On the 20th, we find out more about the IRP.
That's right.
And I know that
Yes.
is going to give us a little more information about the future of Puerto Rico's microgrids, but strengthening those microgrids and industrial hubs is going to be kind of a step towards that energy security that the pharmaceutical industry and manufacturing industry needs in Puerto Rico.
And is there a specific contact that we can direct people to regarding that?
It goes public, I think, around August 20th.
Right.
So yeah, that's today. It's been a long trip.
Yes.
So Preb should release something soon.
Yes.
You know,
The Bureau of the Energy Bureau. It's basically we're probably days away
Okay.
from publishing, the integrated resource plan. And any question, Gil, towards your actual question, we have under our Department of Economic Development and Commerce what is now known as the State Energy Public Policy Program, and we work directly and work very well with the Bureau of Energy, with PREPA, and the key stakeholders, both state and federal. So we can also provide information of our program for whoever wants to have more information on the energy side.
Wonderful, thank you. The next question is from Denise Rico, and she asks, what federal and local incentives are being considered to promote and ensure companies are interested in doing business on the island? And I think that's...
So, Amir, maybe you can speak about the federal and I'll speak about the state side.
Okay, so with regard to federal incentives, we've talked a fair amount about Development Finance Corporation loan programs. It's been mentioned that EPA, Small Business Administration, HUD, CBDGR, there are a bunch of other different federal financing opportunities, and those all go toward getting a project started. One of the things that I'm very concerned about in my role is making sure that we don't just start projects, but we put them on a path towards self-sustainment. So whether that's workforce development embedded in the beginning of a project, or whether it's figuring out how private sector is going to be involved in the long-term operation and sustainment. An example given already was with regard to LUMA and taking over the transmission distribution operations of the grid. They're not going to take over physical infrastructure in the immediate. They are going to take over the operation and improve the operational processes, procedures, workforce engagement, safety systems, and the customer experience. And so they're moving all those things forward with some federal money, but they're also self-financing some of this work that they're going to be doing. And so, and then the other part is that not part of the administration, meaning the executive branch of government, but Congress is currently considering a number of different incentive packages to go potentially in part of a national COVID relief package that could include some different tax credit type items or other incentives toward manufacturing or other nationally significant efforts here in Puerto Rico and in other places. And while some of the bill language doesn't necessarily target Puerto Rico directly, they're written in a way that because of the economic situation here, Puerto Rico has the opportunity to benefit from some of those programs. None of them have been passed into law yet, but there are a number of them up there under consideration. And Resident Commissioner Jennifer Gonzalez Colon is an advocate and actually an author of or sponsor of one of the bills that's under consideration. She now has a Senate co-sponsor in Senator Rubio. And so that package is one that has also the support of the governor. And so I think that one is likely possible to produce some real results for Puerto Rico. And maybe Manuel, you can talk about what's being done on the local side.
Yes, in terms of Puerto Rico state incentives, the key here is to know about Act 60 of 2019. Act 60 of 2019 is our new incentives code. And what we have done is that we have put together under one place essentially all of the key incentives to promote economic development in Puerto Rico. That includes manufacturing, that includes research and development, that includes software development, that includes export services, and many other key areas that are directly related to the goals of reshoring biopharma medical devices back to Puerto Rico. These incentives actually applied for both local companies and entrepreneurs and any outside company or investors that want to establish their business in the island. And then, in a nutshell, it just offers, very attractive tax incentives in terms of preferred local tax rates, tax exemptions, at the municipality level, and others, and also provides cash grants for job creation and retention, infrastructure investment, machinery and equipment investment, and also offers tax credits for certain activities, like, for example, research and development. And also, if the company purchases local goods or products that are manufactured in Puerto Rico, then also we might qualify for additional tax credits. And the idea is to link, foreign direct investment with local companies in Puerto Rico. Just to name some of the things that that we can offer at the state level under Act 60 of 2019.
Let me add to that. One of the things that the manufacturing sector in Puerto Rico has been waiting for is to understand a time frame for what you call the package on the Congress, because the finance might be available, but let's face it, bringing manufacturing to U.S. soil, whether it's in direct domestic U.S. or Puerto Rico, it's a cost issue. China, they can do it at a fraction of what we can actually do it. So looking for finance is one thing, and looking for the package is another. And I think that somehow a manufacturer, before committing to developing a plan or a product or a project, would like to understand what will be their cost basis in order to then justify the project and then look for the financing. So going back then, do you have any idea if Congress will be soon enough come out with a package, whatever it is? And I'm not asking details, but basically, is there any package that will come out before the elections or after the elections? I mean, do you have any idea of the time frame? I think that will help the industry.
The short answer is no. The longer answer is that I haven't survived this long in government by betting on when Congress is going to act. That said, the Boston Consulting Group did a study for the financial board to analyze a couple of the competing provisions to see which might be better. So companies can at least start to analyze, okay, given this scenario or this scenario, here's what I might do. And it may turn out that either scenario provides a benefit for them on which they would be willing to move. I would think that the Congress is going to come up with some type of comprehensive package. I think that the legislative tactics that Representative Gonzalez-Colon has taken on of including this in that national package rather than try to do a standalone bill is probably wise. It comes at some cost of uncertainty of when it will happen, but I think it's probably more likely that it will happen by being embedded in that rather than being a standalone bill. So it's a little bit of a trade-off, and like a lot of things, it seems that we lose a little bit of time waiting for that decision to be made. Also, I tend to use the phrase healthy dissatisfaction to describe when people ask me how I like my job. I usually describe it as healthy dissatisfaction. Healthy because we're moving in the right direction, dissatisfied because we're not moving fast enough. But I have to say that it's really kind of a flip of the switch. If COVID-19 changed the world, it changed this, because now I have essentially civil engineers telling me that I'm not going fast enough. And traditionally, I've been the one telling the civil engineers they're not going fast enough.
I might add two things that I think are very relevant. Number one is that although maybe it doesn't support directly, biopharma or medical devices, it has an indirect effect, which is positive, which is the opportunity zones. Okay, and in Puerto Rico, 95% of the island is an opportunity zone, and there's already interesting deals happening in real estate, mixed use like residential and retail associated with the federal program, and also we're going to be launching hopefully in the next month our own set of regulations for opportunity zones. And the second thing is that, as many people know, the U.S. Department of Transportation issued an order to actually allow a waiver for Puerto Rico for international air cargo and passenger transfer in Puerto Rico. And one of the reasons why that was approved for Puerto Rico is precisely because of our critical mass of the industry, because we do have these pharmaceutical companies and medical device companies in Puerto Rico, and also aerospace and now we have the potential to actually, increase substantially the industry in Puerto Rico, and the waiver, I think, is going to play a key role in achieving that goal.
And Manuel, you raised a good point. And one I was thinking about earlier, the transportation hub approval from the Department of Transportation, and that creates an additional opportunity.
Fantastic.
And I think Rod, when he was here earlier, talked about some misperceptions about Puerto Rico. To the extent that most people in the mainland United States think about Puerto Rico, if they think about it as part of the United States,
Yes.
they think about it as kind of the last stop of the United States in the Caribbean. And I'd like to flip that around and think about it as the first step into the United States from the Caribbean, and make Puerto Rico less of a cul-de-sac of the United States and more of a hub or an intersection. So whether it's technical expertise, for example, in pharmaceutical and medical device manufacturing, whether it's the amazing construction expertise, particularly in the Mechanical Contractors Association, whether it's the aerospace industry that we see out in the Aguadilla area, and the folks out there, the educational system, particularly the technical programs at University of PR Mayagüez and other campus locations, all those things, we have the potential to display the expertise and the workforce innovation of Puerto Rico to our Caribbean neighbors in ways that make Puerto Rico an even bigger part of the United States economy and a bigger part of the regional economy. And I think that transportation waiver is one element that properly exercised could help us do that.
Yeah, and one thing that, very good thing that is happening is that for many years, I will say that this year has been one that we in the private sector has been working very closely with the economic development portion of the government, which is a very good news. In fact, the air cargo, we were one of the ones that supported that with resident commissioner. We've been serving with Invest Puerto Rico as a technical expertise arm regarding how to manage that. And they've been the arm about how strategically and marketing, positioning that worldwide. And it's been doing the same with what we're doing right now of bringing back manufacturing. So I'm very optimistic and enthusiastic on how the private sector has been working together with the government in this portion of the attractive manufacturing.
Great, thank you. Good point. And again, it's that there's every step along the chain has to be equitably capable. And so making sure that all along that chain, and actually the next question is related to that as well. This is from Ignacio Pino, and he says, hello all, and again, thanks for efforts in getting jobs back to Puerto Rico and reversing the brain drain on the island. But he says, please don't forget that biopharma starts with R&D and its supplies. And so, I think the question, is what other efforts in R&D help to support this as well, so that pipeline continues to be robust on the island in terms of developing those new opportunities?
Well, I have three comments in particular. Number one, and one of the bets on Invest Puerto Rico is going to help us to actually promote some of the things that we offer. But many people don't know that Puerto Rico offers a tax credit for research and development, and it's one of the best tax credits that any jurisdiction can offer, any state or territory, or even a country. We offer 50% tax credit for eligible R&D activities, and they can be monetized. So it is an incredible tool. And actually, we passed a law in 2017 that not only is for private investment to leverage with the tax credit, but also it could be federally funded programs. So this is one of the things that people don't know, right? So we want, the reason why Invest Puerto Rico, one of the reasons Invest Puerto Rico exists is precisely because we need to amplify this message. We need to go all over the world and trying to, change the narrative. We have that opportunity here. The second thing is, then we were just talking about it, before. I think we have a strong foundation for research in Puerto Rico. We have incredible scientists. We have the University of Puerto Rico. And it's amazing, the critical mass, but I think that it's time to shift a little bit of that towards applied research, towards meeting the needs of the industry. So I think that is an incredible opportunity. Actually, PRMA and the private sector have been presenting this for a long time, and I believe that there is a gradual change in the local university system in Puerto Rico to realize that it is a void that they need to fill. Same with producing more entrepreneurs and so forth. And the third thing is in terms of brain drain. I mean, Puerto Rico produces more than 1,000 engineers every year. In the key areas, we produce more than 25,000 STEM students every year. And we need to find a way. I mean, of course, we are working together to create the economic opportunities in Puerto Rico. But it's not only about getting them in a good, well-paying job. It's all about also getting inserted in creating new products, new services, new processes, new business models, and specifically in this case in the life science industry. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to do. But certainly, once we start creating economic opportunities, probably other things will fall in the right place.
In addition to that, I think that going back to the partnership with the private sector and the government, let's not forget about the Puerto Rico Science Trust.
Exactly. Thank you.
They are a great entity.
Thank you. Yes.
It's a government entity, and they've been doing an awesome job
That is right.
on research and development for the very first time. I
Yes.
mean, it was able to kind of lift off, and it's flying on themselves right now, which is kind of the beauty of it. They've been able to get a program for the researchers, getting funding from the SBIRs.
Mm-hmm.
They've been matching funds with SBIRs. They have few phases where they can actually match certain amount of funds, and if the idea flies, they have been able to go ahead and raise up perhaps the $50,000 matching up to $750,000 matching, which is great for early development. So they're doing an awesome job, and they also have a program for 2 stages: the entrepreneurship development,
Yes.
which is Colmena 66, and the second program they have, which is actually Parallel 18, which is actually a higher level of entrepreneurship that you already have a product. Now you're just going to want just go ahead and expand it. So we have a wonderful opportunity for research and development under the Puerto Rico Science Trust.
And when we look at attracting investment, we also need to promote Science City. So Science City is in one of the most important projects of the Science Trust, and the idea is to convert, a portion of Atorrey in San Juan, as of course, the title suggests, this incredible place, so we can do a lot of research and development that that can be connected, with the existing industry or the new potential industry that we can bring to Puerto Rico.
And if I could, I'd like to add a comment, and it's not specifically on research and development, but it's what I think is a related concept that I think of as our intellectual supply chain.
Yes.
And so I've asked all of the federal departments and agencies that are doing important work here, whether it's the Army Corps of Engineers and National Guard working on repairing a dam, or it's HUD working on a housing project,
EPA, brownfield projects,
whatever it may be,
Yes.
whatever operating agency may be, is in addition to wanting to see a tangible result of their work, I also ask them what they're doing for workforce development, education, and apprenticeship programs, so that the local workforce can then maintain, operate, and improve whatever that project was that was built with federal funds, that its useful lifetime will be maximized by the application of the efforts of a local workforce. And so I think of that, like I said, as intellectual supply chain,
Yes.
and that we should be, as the federal government, we are investing in that along the way as we do these disaster recovery projects. And I tend to think in the same terms when I think of how private sector begins to expand, whether it's some of the aerospace companies that I saw earlier this week, pharma, or other life sciences, making sure that they create those partnerships with university programs and others to make sure that we develop that workforce.
Agreed.
And one last question, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and I know the DFC representative isn't here anymore, but that program, the funding for that, would be able to be applied to internal research and development within companies. And so it doesn't just have to be related directly to the manufacturing, it could do research and development costs as well, correct? Parallel?
I think because of the authorities they're using under the Defense Production Act, they are looking to tie the loans to some sort of production. But if there is an R&D component of it, then they're still able to fund that. But there does need to be some manufacturing tied to the loan.
Great, thank you. The next question is Michael Magnifico, excuse me. His comment is, thank you for inviting me and for the leadership of the group represented here. The question is, how quickly can a facility for expansion be renovated to comply with medical standards, seeing so many buildings that have sustained damage and have deteriorated? So I think, that's, there's multi-layers to that question. And I just would like to make a comment, first of all, that we actually looked at buildings purposefully on the tour that were many layers in terms of their timeline. And that's a complicated question because it depends on what you want to put in that building. But if somebody else on the panel wants to respond to that.
Well, I will say that out of the government properties that were hit very badly from the hurricane probably are not suitable to do something like a fast track implementation of any manufacturing, regardless. But there's a lot of assets in the island that fit that required needs. So it's a matter of looking at not only the properties that are available for renting, but perhaps the deck might have properties for sale that are in better shape. There's other properties that might be available on the private sector that will fit those requirements.
Yeah, what I will add is that, again, like you said, it all depends on the activity, depends on the specifics. But I will say that one of the things that I really like about this tour is precisely to highlight some of the assets that are available, and it's kind of diverse because you have, for example, companies like GK Pharma, Copan, Romark, and even Avara, actually, that wrote a few minutes ago that they have some extra capacity. And their conditions of the buildings are well maintained enough so they can do some ramp up on the short term. But certainly properties owned by the government, it is not something that you can just turn off a switch, right? It will require investments, and many of the assets that are privately owned and are kind of legacy assets, like the ones that you saw in Humacao and in Guayama, well, requires a degree of investment just because they're being deteriorated for a long time. So so it all depends at the end of the day on the specifics, right? So
and I think it's important too to note that many of these properties there are some that are move-in ready. There are some that will take longer, but all of them collectively are going to be quicker than doing a greenfield new development. Exactly. With the planning process and all that goes into that, you're talking a 3-year period of time. And even some of the worst properties we saw had buildings that have less than a 2-year renovation, because property especially industrial or commercial property on the island is built to incredibly high standards because of the fact that they're built to be earthquake and hurricane proof. And so a lot of the things are mechanical or cosmetic improvements that need to be made. So,
and one very quick comment is that towards where you said, for example, in terms of the Puerto Rico owned buildings, we already know that they may be at least 100, 150 out of the 1,500 units that we have in Puerto Rico. That they just the value is really the location, right? The actual land and the already designation that is industrial. So for permitting, it's very easy to actually, is even better just to take, demolish what is there and just build something from scratch. And the value is really, the fact that it already has, the zoning is perfect for whatever activities that you're looking for. So it facilitates, the permitting process as well. And then it's all about the planning and the construction, right? So.
The next question is Andy Carlson. And he asks, is there any option for development capital given the challenges in Puerto Rico? So spec building, cost association.
I don't know that there's a federal funding stream associated just with spec building like that. But if there was a very specific target on an industry or capability, I suppose there might be, but we're looking for, kind of quick wins with regard to the medical supply chain. So I don't know that the kind of, hey, we're going to build something and see if somebody comes. I don't know that that's amenable to the federal financing, the federal financing programs that we're here to discuss right now.
Thank you. And he also asked, Andy also asked if this was going to be recorded, and it is being recorded, and so we'll have it on our website so that people can watch later. The next question is from Francisco Cabrera, and he asks, reshoring pharma to any jurisdiction requires it to be competitive, not only in taxes, but also in duties charged. Is there an attractive package in place to promote Puerto Rico as a jurisdiction?
I think we covered that a little bit earlier, right?
Yeah, I think so. We talked about some of the federal incentives that are available both currently, but I think the other part is that the executive orders that the president has signed regarding reshoring, they take a couple different tactics. There are some things there where the departments and agencies are mandated to look at their business processes and see if there are ways that we can expedite some of the permitting and regulations. So, for example, FDA is strongly encouraged to expedite the approval of investigational medicines and things like that. And then on the other side of it, on the demand side, is that federal departments and agencies are being told essentially to buy American when it comes to medical supply chain, including medicines, medical devices, and PPE. And so on the customer side, the administration has taken steps to ensure that the federal government becomes a bigger and better customer of the medical supply chain. So that also should be an incentive toward production.
Yeah, and I might add that what's not mentioned before is that we in Puerto Rico, due to the distance from the U.S. mainland and being an island, has some additional cost issues, inherent to the location. So one of the things that we've been working on in the Puerto Rico Manufacturers Association since early March is we created a task force to look at all of the different legislations that are being submitted in Congress to ensure that we provide recommendations to ensure that we basically get included on those with the right opportunities. Because the least thing we want is to have a wonderful legislation that will bring manufacturing to U.S. soil, and Puerto Rico, due to the specific being a territory and being on the distance, does not get included in a good opportunity fashion for us. I mean, we're not looking to be exclusive. We want to make sure that we get included in the legislation. So we've been looking at every single legislation, and we've been submitting recommendations formally to all these legislators and the resident commissioner.
Well, that's a great point, and I've got a personal stake in that issue as well. So many of you know that my military branch of service is the U.S. Coast Guard, the only branch of the military that's not in the Department of Defense. We're in the Department of Homeland Security, and so just like sometimes legislation is written in Congress that applies to states in a certain way and forgets about or treats the territories in a different way, every now and then something gets written in Congress for the troops and somehow misses those troops whose home agency is the Department of Homeland Security. So that's an issue that I'm particularly tuned into and keep an eye out for as well.
We are on the watch.
It's not only territories, it's also the state of Hawaii, the state of Alaska. That is about geographical disadvantages.
And there are some national policies that produce some weird results when the territory or state to which it's applied is not contiguous to the others.
Correct. Yes.
Right. And somewhat related to that, this next question is, considering that this is an election year both on the island and federally, what's the continuity of the programs for the participants? Any thoughts on continuing with?
Yeah, I mean, EPA's programs are built into statute, so they will continue. I think the question would be the level of energy and the priority that's put behind them. I know the Trump administration, we've made an effort with respect to brownfields and redeveloping areas. You brought up opportunity zones earlier, and that's a great example. When you start packaging opportunity zones, brownfields, and a host of other programs, all of a sudden you actually have a significant amount of capital that can be invested in areas that actually drives the needle. And so I think it's a matter of priority, and we certainly made it a priority, and the president has told us to make it a priority. So that as long as we're here, I think we're going to continue to do that.
And I would add to that, actually, one of the questions that I was first asked when I started in this job and did a press conference with the governor back in February was, what are some of your biggest concerns and challenges? And I said that my biggest concern is continuity, is ensuring that the working relationships between federal departments and agencies and their government of Puerto Rico counterparts and their day-to-day work processes are smooth enough to survive the political weather around them. And I've built a great working relationship with Governor Vasquez and her cabinet, including Secretary LeBoy and others. And an election is going to come. There's going to be a different governor and a different cabinet, and I will work just as hard to establish that similar working relationship with them. And as importantly, at the agency level, ensuring that the agency momentum that's been gained over the past 12 months, practically, for example, between HUD and Vivienda, between FEMA and Core 3, that momentum and the processes remain intact and carry their way through, like I said, the political weather.
Mm-hmm.
And one last thing I want to add on the state side, on the Puerto Rico side, the perfect example of what we're trying to do with continuity is precisely Invest Puerto Rico, right? We believe that, the promotion of Puerto Rico, as an investment destination, and the same thing with Discover Puerto Rico, the marketing of the island as a global destination for visitors, should no longer be in the government side. I mean, we had maybe 5 changes in government over the last 20 years, or a little bit more, I will say. And it's hard, to have consistency and continuity every 4 years, with changes in plans and what have you. I mean, in the case of the Science Trust, is a perfect example of something that it's, aside, for political cycles in Puerto Rico, and they continue to focus on the policies associated with research and technology and science. And we hope that, Invest Puerto Rico and Discover Puerto Rico will do the same.
I also would like to add the Luma deal is another example.
Exactly,
of that type of
the Luma deal.
continuity. The
Exactly,
purpose of that is
that is
so
true.
You have better customer service,
Yes.
but you also have these 5, 10, 15-year contracts. So you
Correct.
don't have a new CEO come in when there's a new governor, and then have to learn the process and change staff.
Yes.
It's the whole purpose of that. So if we can see more deals like that, and I think the goal is to see more deals like that with the legacy assets and with Palo Seco, we will see a stronger grid. We'll see more continuity, and I think that these are 3 really good examples.
Yes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That's great. I just want to make there was a comment during the course of our conversation that was related to, or I want to make a comment, I guess, about the question of timeline for how long it would take to get a building operational and up to medical standards. And the island does have a very strong mechanical contractors association, and they would be a great resource to answer those questions. That would it take 6 months, a year, or 2? And so I would encourage people to reach out to the Mechanical Contractors Association. And I think I'm out of questions now, unless anyone else has questions to write in.
Let me just add to what you just said. If I go back to the year 2000, I was related strongly to the pharmaceutical industry, and we decided to build a pharmaceutical warehouse. It was a pioneer concept, and we visited every single building available in the government, and it didn't fit the requirements. So my second step was to look for some land, and then we went into the process of getting a land that had the classification, because it will take you longer to get the change of classification. So putting back to the conversation, we decided to just acquire the land and build the building from scratch. And like the Mechanical Association, the AGC, the Construction Association, they can actually go ahead and refer you to a good builder that will just do it in very fast, in no time. So it depends on what you really need to implement.
And we have some success stories about public-private, partnership, not strictly, in our Act 29 law, but traditional partnership. For example, we visited Honeywell in Mocha. That was built to suit. And that was actually, you know, a partnership with the government, and same thing with Cooper Vision in Juana Diaz in the south. Is, you know, were buildings that were actually constructed to suit the needs of specific, you know, tenants. So those things are still available, you know, for any opportunity.
Great, thank you. And actually, that's related to several of the comments that have come in just since that was started. And this maybe is a good final question. I know we're getting close to the end of this session. Marisa Gerena asks, what are the next steps in the process that were initiated this week? And I guess that's for everybody representing various agencies here.
Okay, I guess I'll start there. So I think this was a huge step, because this week the tour that Invest Puerto Rico has put together is one of the first opportunities we've had to bring the potential dance partners together in the same room, even if it's a virtual room. And that is the investor side, the company side, the facility side. So everybody has an opportunity to see where those opportunities are. I think in my world of work specifically, my next steps are to try to increase the visibility of this issue nationally. We talked about the legislation, how long it's going to take for that to pass. If there's only, you know, the resident commissioner and one Senate colleague who know and care about this, that's a little bit harder. If I can help to expand the knowledge of this to other folks on Capitol Hill, their staffs, through the media, then it becomes a little bit easier for that part of the bill to pass and get public support. So that's a piece that I can do. I think the other part is also the other expansion that we talked about is looking at other elements of the supply chain. So whether it's transportation, communications, and you will know better than I what other companies or industries are related to this, and ensure that they aren't an obstacle to success by bringing them into the team that's looking at the financial opportunities, the facility opportunities, and the project opportunities, so that we can put them all together in a way that helps the whole team succeed.
Great, thank you. Before we move on to the next, I just want to say thank you for noting Invest Puerto Rico, but it was also a partnership with PRMA, PIA, the pharmaceutical industry of the island, and DDAC as we put this together. So we're very thankful for that partnership, and want to point out that it's that kind of public-private partnership. That's an important thing, that Puerto Rico is ready to work together to that end. Secretary?
You know, I think moving forward for us, what we want to continue to do is support Rear Admiral Brown and his efforts on the island. We also want to continue to do our work with respect to recovery efforts, make sure that we are here. I think for us, it's more of an ongoing effort than anything new. We want to make sure that we're here, we're available. Pete Lopez, again, as a regional administrator of Region 2, I know, and he and his team are here frequently, and we want to be available to folks. I think what we need to do as a step that I'm taking out of this, based upon having been here the last couple of days in this conversation, is make sure that people are aware of the different opportunities there are at EPA for loans, grants, and also technical assistance, which I think is perhaps one of the most important tools we have, is sort of the capital of the people at the agency that can help in a variety of areas, from energy to solid waste disposal to other efforts that you're making. So that's what we're taking out of it.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very excited with the outcome of this trip. I think that we're looking at something beyond recovery. Our main role is disaster recovery here, but seeing how we can build a stronger economy for Puerto Rico, and it could support the United States supply chain is a beautiful thing. So I'm happy to be part of this, and thank you all very much for setting up this visit. It's very helpful.
Great.
Also, I one thing, I encourage all the companies that are watching to apply for the DFC loan sooner rather than later. They're very fast. I know I've heard stories of some companies saying we need 30 days and DFC saying you have 10. So they're very fast and they're very motivated. So let's take advantage of that and work together.
Yes, and I would just echo what Juan just said. We would absolutely encourage all of the companies who are seeking financing to apply for those DFC loans if it's something that makes sense for you all. I think it's a wonderful tool that we're able to offer for at least the next 2 years, potentially longer. But we would certainly encourage everyone who's interested to apply for it. And I think on our end, we'll continue to work with the DFC and our other interagency partners at the Departments of Defense and Health and Human Services, the Veterans Affairs, and other agencies to continue to take all the steps we can, both from a regulatory and government procurement perspective, to ensure we're offering all the incentives we can to continue to support this industry and bring back this critical supply chain.
So at the regional level, our role is very much as the service delivery vehicle. So we take the programs, the policies, the broad initiatives, and our job is to bring them to the ground level. So all of these initiatives are only as good as the impact they have on our homes, our families, our businesses, our economy, our quality of life. So our role at the regional level is working with the leadership of Doug, with the Rear Admiral, is to take lessons that we're learning with recovery in terms of collaboration, interagency engagement, public-private sector, and drive forward on a project-by-project basis. So identify projects, line up the supports that are needed to advance them, and then deliberately move forward. So doing that with recovery funding, but also, as Doug was pointing out, regular programmatic funding that exists within our agencies. So we want to be on the ground, collaboratively driving projects forward with the local vision and leadership setting the priorities and parameters.
I will say that it's all about execution, right? I think what I like about this group is that we're focused on making things happen, right? There's a lot of expectations. Our role is to support all the initiatives at the federal level, at the state level, to achieve the same goal. So hopefully, I think that is about encouraging applications, in this case of the DFC. I think there's interesting prospects. And also just keep promoting Puerto Rico, right? I mean, it's about the narrative, narrative at the national level, narrative in terms of the industry. And there's, some people in Puerto Rico believe that the rest of the world knows about what's happening here. It's not, I mean, there's an incredible opportunity to keep, creating the conscience about, the possibilities of Puerto Rico and the things that we can really do, in this case, to support national security goals.
Well, let me tell you my math for the first time. I think it's a very good question to conclude, because basically it's what's next, And before answering that, I will say that what brings us here to this round of visit is that when Admiral Brown came in with the resident commissioner last June, and we had the opportunity to visit some of the plants, he said, well, I was very impressed with what I saw in paper, but seeing now physically going to these sites is certainly mind-blowing, because you cannot really figure out or even recreate what's happening just from looking at the papers, although the papers were impressive. So he said, people close to the administration and Congress has to see what I saw today, and we took that as an appointment, because one of the things that's been happening for many years is, and I've been related to manufacturing since 1976, is that manufacturing in Puerto Rico had no need to market themselves. Tourism, it's a different industry. Tourism depends on a lot of marketing. I mean, you have to get outside and let the people know that you exist, and you have wonderful beaches and sand and good sun most of the time, great weather. So there's a lot of marketing efforts outside Puerto Rico. Well, guess what? Even with 60 years of manufacturing experience, we didn't have the need to go out there and tell the world that we were the best and the highest quality. It just happened behind the scenes, and there's been marketing efforts from the government, but basically has been offices, very quietly going to different countries and saying, you know what, we're great, come and visit us. And so for the very first time, after the Admiral's comment, we said, well, we really have to go out there and let people in the world know that we exist, and the capacities and the strong workforce and the quality of our workforce and our products. And that's where we actually had the opportunity to, discuss with Invest Puerto Rico and saying, you know what, let's go after this, because we didn't have the need before. We didn't know how to do it before because it was not needed, perhaps. Okay, so it has been a great opportunity. So whoever asked the question, this is the second time the Admiral and now new officers come and visit. I think this has been the second of probably few more that will happen, because more opportunities will come out of this. So we have to continue to tell the world that we are the place to bring manufacturing to U.S. soil. I mean, we done it for years. We done it with high quality for years. So it's basically we're ready, and we have now the next step is to continue to let the world know that we can do it fast at the quality required. Thank you.
Well, it's very
Well,
easy.
that's
Very easy to say. We can summarize it in very simple, right, Admiral? China fired, Puerto Rico hired.
That's fantastic. Exactly. And I hate to not have that be the last thought, but maybe you'll have to repeat that after. But from an Invest Puerto Rico perspective, we are working very hard. And to segue from Carlos's comment, we are the attraction and marketing agency for the island to really provide that global messaging. And it's dependent on the individuals and the entities that have participated in this call and that we visited. We need to know what your assets are, and we need to be able to represent that appropriately in a global market. And so we encourage you to reach out to us and provide that kind of information so that we can continually update the information that we can provide. And then beyond that, these kinds of forums, as you said, Admiral Brown, need to continue. And we would really invite that opportunity to continue that. And then the third piece of that is we encourage all the partners to keep watching our website and watch the opportunities to engage there as we continue to build out the connections we have with organizations like PRMA, PIA, Induniv, important partners on the island. But then also come up with newsletters and opportunities for companies to sign up so that we can do that matchmaking between investors, companies, scientists, and properties. So this is a very important moment to change the way that these partnerships have been done in the past. So thank you so much. And are there Secretary LeBoy or Admiral Brown closing thoughts or remarks?
No, I think you summarized it very well. There's clearly a lot of work to do. One of the things that I've been very impressed about, Manuel, Secretary LeBoy, helped to facilitate a town hall from La Fortaleza last month, and I came away from that thinking that the level of enthusiasm and optimism, I think, is the most remarkable part of this whole process for me. And so harnessing that to move in a direction that we all share, which is improving the national medical supply chain and improving the economy and resiliency of Puerto Rico, that makes the next steps, difficult though they may be, makes them enjoyable to take on. So thank you all very much to PRMA for hosting us today, Invest Puerto Rico, DDEC, and all our partners, and my federal family for joining us here. This has been a wonderful opportunity and very informative.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an honor.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Fantastic.